Hello, everyone, and welcome. We're so thrilled that you're choosing to invest 60 minutes of your day with us on this learning journey with Dr. Marilee Adams and Andrea Lipton. And I am Becky Robinson, and I want to take a moment as you're coming in to thank our sponsors for today's event. Barrett Kohler Publishers, who was my publisher and Marilee's publisher, is generously supporting today's event so that you can learn more about these two new books that Marilee is launching today. So thank you for coming. As you're getting settled in, I hope you'll take a moment to find the Zoom chat. We want this chat throughout today's event to be a rich place of conversation and engagement and connection. And so please take a moment to find the chat, say hello. And if you want to, let us know where you're calling in from today. I am calling in from my home office in Lambertville, Michigan. And it's kind of fun because I know, Marilee, you are calling in from your home office in
Lambertville, New Jersey.
Isn't that a cool thing? Now, Andrea mentioned that she is in Redondo Beach, California, which is not a Lambertville at all, but
No.
we are still including you anyway. It's not the Lambertville Club. It's also the Curly Hair Club. We were talking before the call about how we all have this naturally curly hair. If you have naturally curly hair, go ahead and give us a shout in the chat. It is going so fast. But welcome to all of you. I want to acknowledge that you have lots of choices about how to spend your time, and that you would choose to invest your time learning with us is a gift. A quick question: if you happen to be calling in from your organization and this is a part of your professional development, would you tell us what organization you represent? And I do see a curly haired Diane from Cottonwood Heights, Utah. Very cool. I love it. It looks like we have somebody else, Sabra from Houston, Texas. We've got all the curly haired people on the call. I love it. And someone from the University of Michigan. So welcome. Because the chat is going so fast, I probably won't be able to shout you all out today. But what I want you to know is that after the call, we read the chat in detail because it's important to us to know who you are and to acknowledge your presence. And so thank you to everyone who is answering.
You're having so much curly hair.
Well, yeah, that must really resonate with everyone. If anybody has any suggestions on products, I'll take those in the chat too. All right, so as I mentioned, we have a very exciting day for Dr. Marilee Adams because today is not only the launch of one book, but the launch of two. And you can see behind Marilee, or Marilee, if you want to hold them up, we are celebrating today the launch of two books, Change Your Questions, Change Your Life, which is being released in its 4th edition, and also the brand new, never before available, Change Your Questions, Change Your Life workbook. And as we go throughout this hour, we will be sharing more about that with you. But I want you to know just from the start that the workbook is a standalone product. It's a standalone resource. It is helpful to you whether you have the book or not, although we hope that you'll choose to get both for optimal learning. And we are going to talk about both today as we go throughout the hour. So throughout the day, we do encourage you to put your questions and comments in the chat. Toward the end of the hour, we will take some of your questions, as many as time allows, and we'll be letting you know also throughout today's event how you can stay more in touch with and learn more from Dr. Marilee Adams and her team. And so just watch the chat for all of that important information. Before we get any further, I do want to go ahead and introduce our panelists today. We do have Dr. Marilee Adams. She is an award-winning author and a pioneer in the field of inquiry-based coaching, leadership, and organizational culture. She's also the CEO founder of the Inquiry Institute, which is a solutions and performance-based company providing consulting, coaching, training, keynotes, and e-learning. And I have had the pleasure of knowing Marilee over the years. We were joking that we shared a cab together many years ago, and this work continues to resonate around the world. And so we're thrilled that you can learn about it today. We also have today Andrea Lipton, who is the Senior Director of Learning for the Inquiry Institute and also serves as a facilitator, a coach, and an instructional designer for the Inquiry Institute. And she was an invaluable and instrumental partner in creating the workbook. So we included her in today's session so that she could share a bit more about the workbook and how to use it with us. So before we get any further, though, we do want to get to know a bit about you. And so we have a couple of polls. We hope you'll participate. I'm going to launch poll number 1. It says, what do you hope to achieve today? We want to know why you came. Are you hoping to discover how to change your mindset, Are you hoping to learn how to ask better questions? Or are you a fan of Marilee Adams like I am and you're excited to learn from her? So I will give you a few moments. And while you're answering the poll, how amazing that 435 of you have joined us today. This is among the most well-attended webinars we've had in some time, and I'm grateful for each of you who have chosen to be here with us. So let's take a look at the results of this poll. Before I show the results, Marilee, do you have any guess on why people are here today?
I would say all of the above plus.
Well, it looks like I can see in the chat that we have at least one Andrea fan here. I'm sure there are more than one. So here's what we see. It looks like overwhelmingly 72% of you are here because you want to learn how to ask better questions. And then we do have some folks who are fans and who want to change their mindsets. So let's take another look at the next poll. We are curious to hear about your previous exposure to Marilee Adams, the Inquiry Institute, and this work. So if you have previously read editions of Change Your Questions, Change Your Life, will you let us know about that? Maybe you've participated in Marilee's workshops, online courses, or events. Maybe you're on her email list and you got to this webinar because you were invited through that email list, or maybe you are following Marilee on social. I do see in the chat, it looks like we have someone who's saying none of the above came from an invitation for a friend. So go ahead and tell us in the chat if you're here for some other reason. And we're going to give you a few more moments. It looks like we have quite a few people who are invited by email, which is great. Now, for those who are answering the poll, it looks like quite a few have read previous editions of this book. So it will be interesting for you to hear about the workbook as well. I'm going to give you a few more moments and I'm going to just update everyone. I said we had 435 people. We now have 467 people. So there is a ton of interest in this topic and we're thrilled to see you all here. All right, I'm going to end this poll so that we can get to the meat of the content today. It looks like about half the people on the call have read previous editions of the book. About 14% of you have participated in a workshop, course, or event. It looks like a quarter of the ones who responded are on your email list and a small percentage following on social. All right, well, we have so much we want to talk about today, so let's dive in. So Marilee, you probably know even more than I do what a big deal it is that this book has made it to a 4th edition. In fact, since Change Your Questions, Change Your Life first came out, it has become an international bestseller and sold over 400,000 copies in 22 languages, which is just amazing because most business books never sell more than 5,000 copies. So this is exceedingly impressive. And because of that, I have a lot of curiosity. And I'm wondering if you can tell us, Marilee, a little bit more about the book and why you think it's become so popular.
I would love to tell you that. And thank you all for being here. We're up to 483, which is remarkable. The book is a quick read fable. And one of the reasons it's so popular is because it's a fable. I get thanked for that all the time. It's a story about Ben, who's failing as a leader. He's also not doing so well at home with his wife. And his CEO assigns him to work with an executive coach, Joseph. And Ben reluctantly agrees. And through the book, he learns all the question thinking and mindset material that we're going to be talking about today. And as you can imagine, at the end, it all works out. In fact, he started by being proud of the fact that he was the answer man, not knowing that that was actually part of the problem. By the end of the book, he's made it as an inquiring leader. So there's a lot of material, theory, and practices and tools in the book, but the story is compelling and it becomes very sticky for people. It's not unusual that someone will read it on a plane, get off, call right away. We had a dentist write us who said, I just bought 42 copies for my staff. People buy it for their partners, for their children, for their friends, for their colleagues. And in fact, I'd say almost every engagement at Inquiry Institute began because somebody read the book and said, I have to have that, or my team has to have that, or my family has to have that. And then they give us a call. But I think what makes it really sticky and this is the nerd in me, is the theory works. Because if the theory didn't work, people wouldn't report to us so frequently that they have naturally started thinking differently, naturally starting to ask more questions, naturally beginning to have better results in all kinds of interactions in their lives. So that's the part that really pleases me, that the theory works. And as they say, nothing so practical as a good theory.
So Marilee, you've told me that there are two big ideas in the book. And what are they and why have they become so important?
Well, the two ideas are about question thinking and mindsets, and I'm going to talk about each of those separately. The first one is question thinking. And what all that means is we think with questions, even though mostly we're not aware of it. When we become aware of it and know how to assess the value of the questions, then we're positioned to change our questions, which makes it an extremely practical how-to. So the questions we ask ourselves lead to how we think, how we feel, how we behave, and the results that we get. So, and also how we listen. So it becomes really a treasure to be able to recognize we think with questions and then to start observing the questions that we're asking for. And I'm going to give you one quick example of behavior, which is imagine it's a very long time ago, and we're all nomads. And because we're nomads, we're driven by an implicit question, which is, how do we get ourselves to water? And you can see that it's a natural, logical consequence of answering that question that nomads would go look for water. At some point in history, the implicit question changed. And the new question was, how do we get water to come to us? That is a paradigm shifting question. And without it, we wouldn't have agriculture, cities away from water, we wouldn't have Las Vegas. So changing that question, I haven't interviewed any of them, but I'm sure the behavior's right. How do we get water to come to us? Change civilization, changed history, and knowing how to change our questions can also change all of our own personal lives, which is a lot of what we're going to get into today. The other big idea is about mindsets. We all have two mindsets, one of which I call learner, the other I call judger. When we are in learner mindset, we're more open-minded, curious, and accepting. When we're in judger mindset, we're more critical and closed-minded. And the important thing to remember is we all have both. They're both normal. What makes it powerful to distinguish the two mindsets is that when we can see where we are, then we can choose the questions that are taking us wherever it is we want to go. And you'll see that pretty soon in the choice map, which we'll get to in a minute. So I was happy to see how many of you were interested in learning how to ask better questions. You might not have known that we were going to start with questions we ask ourselves before questions to ask others, but I will give you an Einstein quote that validates the usefulness of this. And he said, if I had an hour to solve a problem and my life depended on the solution, I would spend the first 55 minutes determining the proper questions to ask. For if I knew the proper questions, I could solve that problem in less than 5 minutes. So I want to illustrate that story with a slide. So if you'll bring up the new futures slide. So imagine, let's just use the nomads to look at this. You see that there's a wavy line, and that wavy line represents some kind of ongoing situation, sometimes up, sometimes down, but it's ongoing. At the bottom, we have time. On the side, we have results. And you see there's a circle, and it says new question, new future. So going back to the nomads, the old question how do we get ourselves to water, would have continued until maybe we were extinct, who knows? But the new question, how do we get water to come to us? That new question would be in the circle. And that new question was the catalyst for new behavior, which yielded extraordinary new results.
That's a very helpful view. Thank you for illustrating it. So before we get too far, I'm hoping that you can share with us what's new in this latest edition of the book.
I was very excited to do this new edition because I've learned so much since the last one, and that's part of the pleasure of being able to update. So in addition to a book discussion guide, which many people have been asking for, and a glossary, and much more work on leadership integrated throughout, the biggest obvious change is that there is a new chapter, and it's on switching strategies, and it's actually on neuroscience. And all of this wonderful research in neuroscience has helped us to understand why this work works so well. So the new chapter illustrates in the story form, because it's consistent with the story, how learning how to switch our mindsets from judger to learner is also, it's based in neuroscience, and it really impacts how we think, how we feel, how we behave, and the kinds of results that we're able to get. And it's thrilling to me to keep getting more research that validates the theory behind this. Emotional intelligence does as well. Appreciative inquiry does as well. And so it's just really cool to see how it all maps out.
Amazing. Well, so you referenced before the choice map, and I know we have a lot of fans on the call of the choice map, and it's central to your work and to the book. So I know we're going to take a look at it together, and I'm hoping that you'll show us how it illustrates both the question thinking and the mindsets, and how we have the power to choose in any moment. I'll bring the slide back up.
Choice map.
Mm-hmm.
Give you all a moment to look at it. So what you see on the choice map, first of all, the title, choice map, we choose moment by moment. And this is a snapshot in time. It is not a video. At any moment, something happens. And at any moment, there's an afterwards. So we either go judger, which I mentioned judger mindset before. You can see that's the path at the bottom that ends in the, I call it famous judger pit with the people who work with us. And we also, at that moment, could make a different choice and take the learner mindset. And you can see that the questions in the thought bubbles on each path are quite different. You also can see that the learner path goes off the edge, and that's on purpose, because when we're in learner mindset, we are open for possibilities and for innovation that might not be known at all now. But the learner mindset is the place from which we innovate, from which we create, from which we connect. And so it's a very quick look. You see the switching lane. We'll talk about that in a minute. And what's really interesting too about the choice map, noticing, by the way, that judger is reactive and learner is choosing, is that it's also incredibly intuitive and easy to use. And I have a very quick story about that, which was startling to me. So we had a woman from Expedia in our Chief Question Officer course. It's a long, immersive course. And like everybody in the last few years, she was working at home, and she had shared the choice map with her family. So she told us in a webinar that one day she was at her desk doing her thing, and her 6-year-old son came running into the room, and he said, "Mommy, you've got to print something for me." And she looked at him and said, "Okay, what do you want me to print?" that choice map thing. I have to have a copy of that choice map thing. So she looked at him and she said, I'll print it for you, but what do you need it for? And he said, my friend just made a judger decision and I have to help him. Which blew my mind, I have to say. And what had his friend done? In kindergarten, he had picked up a chair and thrown it across the room. Imagine what had to go on in that 6-year-old's head and how intuitive this was, that he was able to understand it and also to have an idea of how to use it.
That's a really powerful story.
Yeah, I know. And
Unforgettable.
it is. I mean, I still get chills when I tell it. I do want to mention something about the choice map, that it is available for free. You'll get more information about that at the end of the webinar today. And there'll be a link in the chat that you can also do that. And so you can download the choice map. It'll ask you to take a short quiz, and then you'll get back some useful information about it. So don't worry if you're not capturing the whole thing in your head right now, because you can capture it for real later. And I just noticed we're at 507 people. Thank you for joining us.
Amazing. So Marilee, can we talk about the switching question? I see it kind of on the right of the map. It's the how-to for changing if you find that you're in a judger mindset and you want to get back to that learner mindset. And I'm wondering if you can give us some examples of the switching questions that we could use, and then the psychology behind how it works to help us if we find that we're stuck reacting, how can we switch to choice?
So switching questions are the how-to for change. It requires noticing that we're in judger non-judgmentally, and then asking a question, and it could be, what do I want? Is what's happening what I want to be happening? How else can I think about that? And those kinds of questions lift us out of judger and into learner. There are many other switching questions as well, and many of the switching questions laced throughout the book. It's actually one of the basic things that that Ben learns that makes all the difference for him. And but it's important to remember that when I identify switching and also the mindsets, what we're talking about is something that's naturally in us. We all have both mindsets. We all know how to ask questions. We've all changed from one to the other. But what we haven't done for the most part is learned how to take what we know and make it reliable and predictable so that it's available, which is the essence of self-empowerment and self-control. And the choice map actually is a self-coaching model. And I have one quick story to go with the choice map too. And it's a dream I had, believe it or not. And the dream was about Brad Pitt. Now I got a lot of people's attention. And in the dream, I give Brad Pitt a choice map. And he looks it over and he says to me, can you teach me how to switch? Can you teach me how to use this? And in the dream, I said to him, you already know how. And I'm saying the same thing to everyone who's with us today and everybody who reads the books. You already know how. But what I can do is show you how to do it predictably and reliably in a way that has you feel more centered, more in control, more open to possibilities, more open to other people. So this is validating and extending something that you already know how to do.
Amazing. Marilee, thank you for that. So I can tell, and on our previous interactions, of course, it's obvious how passionate you are about this work. So can you tell us a bit more about why you're passionate about this work and what you have as your hopes and dreams for what this work can do in the world?
Well, you're right. Not only am I passionate I'm actually getting more passionate. And I've been doing this work for over 30 years. And my passion comes from the impact of it and what we see. So this book has become kind of an underground bestseller. We didn't do much to make it happen. And yet over 400,000 copies, 22 languages. We have students coming to us from all over the world. And in Zoom world now, it's even easier. We get reports of people making major changes from reading the book and from using the material in it. And I think by now you have a small idea of the difference between what it means to be in learner mindset, what it means to be in judger mindset. And in almost every case, learner is going to win the day. So to have a vehicle that's simple and practical and accessible that people can use to transform their lives from being perhaps predominantly in judger to taking up residence in learner most of the time, that's my dream. And what does that provide for us? It provides what we call learner living, or what we talk about here is helping to create a learner world. And think about it for yourself. If almost everybody you knew at work and at home and everywhere else was in learner mindset most of the time, how would that change your life and theirs? So we get to see it all the time. And in fact, I'll tell a short story at the end of one of the effects of that. And that's why I get up excited every morning to be able to share this work.
Thank you. So now we want to shift to talking about this brand new book, the companion workbook, Change Your Questions, Change Your Life. And I'm hoping, Marilee, that you can tell us why you decided to do a workbook. You've mentioned that it's really different than most workbooks. So I'd love to hear about what's special about it and what's different about it. And I know we're going to invite Andrea also to talk with us soon.
So I'm just going to say a little bit and then turn it over to Andrea. People have been asking for this workbook for years and years and years. And because there are 12 tools at the end of the Fable book, that was kind of the workbook. But it wasn't sufficient for us to be able to provide people an actual experience that they could go on a journey, just like Ben in the Fable book, learn the material and come out someplace different at the other end. So I know that's kind of a tease. It's meant to be a tease. And I'm going to turn it over to Andrea, with whom I worked on the workbook. And she will do her usual brilliant job of sharing it.
Well, you know, like many of you who read the book, I was asking myself, how can I actually be Ben at the end, preferably not at the beginning, right? And be a leader in my own life and be a leader of myself and the people that I lead professionally and personally, who's able to use really effective questions. And that was more than, I think 49% of you are here asking yourself the question, how can I ask better questions? And developing this workbook is really an answer to how to get there. And because it's all about noticing the questions that we're thinking with. And what's really fun and special about this workbook is, and for those of you who've been to workshops with Inquiry Institute, you've had an experience like this, of being led through a really practical process of, I'm going to apply the question thinking toolkit and the choice map very practically to my life. So in the workbook, we call this a mindset challenge, because who among us doesn't have a mindset challenge? And Marilee already knows, I have had a mindset challenge around toilet paper. Now, I'm an over person, and I have the tragic misfortune of loving an under person. And, you know, even though I can show him pictures of the patent that originally started toilet paper and the fact that it's clearly designed to go over, he insists that it's an under thing. And so it might sound like a really trivial thing, but for me, that was actually a mindset challenge, because every time I went to the bathroom, it would frustrate me and make me upset. And by using the question thinking toolkit and asking myself how I could switch out of judger over toilet paper. And, you know, there are 497 of you on this call who can feel me on this, right? Small things like this can really set us off. But we also have bigger mindset challenges in our life as well, like Ben does in the Fable book, that's stopping him from having the success that he's committed to having, whether it's both professionally in his relationships and with his team, as well as personally with his wife, and who among us can relate to that. So we designed the workbook to really center around what's a mindset challenge for you. And we recommend you with another person. Get him his own roller. Okay, Ken, I'm with you. Okay, our next place will have to be a 2-roll household. I've been looking for the vertical, so there's no forward or there's no over or under. But actually, this has become a great workshop for me to practice using question thinking, because guess what? The paper gets changed in our house on a regular basis several times a week. And so you get to pick an actual circumstance for your life, a situation with you and a person and your mindset that you're committed to transforming and you're committed to shifting. And you get to check in with yourself at the very beginning of the process. Where am I at and what kinds of questions am I thinking with? And we actually created a check-in that's designed to support you in noticing where you have the presence of both learner and judger. And a reminder that both mindsets can be internally focused on yourself and externally focused on others. So my toilet paper judger sounded something like this: how can he be so stupid? And then my judger turned inward on me and said, how can you be so mean to call the man that you love stupid over something as trivial as toilet paper, right? And then I could go, as Marilee says, it's judger squared, right? Going judger on my judger. And you get the opportunity to answer some questions at the beginning and discover the kinds of questions, both learner and judger, because we always have both mindsets. The question is, what's the balance of the mindsets that you're bringing to a relationship or situation? And how can you start to shift the balance? So that I'm predominantly a learner. And I love when Marilee said this to me a while back. She goes, we want learner to be our primary resident. Like, we're always going to take trips to judger. That's just part of being human. It's hardwired into us. It's part of our survival instinct. But can my primary residence be in learner? And when I notice I've gone on a judger trip, can I quickly bring myself back to my home base of learner and switch? And I had such a wonderful experience of this the other day. I had been up since 4 in the morning, and I was working on a project with someone who was, in my opinion, over depending on my advice. And my judger was going, why, I'm so tired, why can't this person figure it out? And then I took a deep breath and I was like, what does my wise learner want me to ask this person right now? And I asked, what would you advise if you didn't have me here to ask for your advice? And in that moment, the person shared what their thoughts were, and it was an opening of, oh my gosh, that's brilliant. That was in fact actually much wiser than what I would have said. And my advice wouldn't have been nearly as effective as what they already had within them. And so thankfully I was able to tap in that moment to my learner mindset, because I've been practicing this, and the workbook is really your opportunity to practice by starting with a mindset check-in, creating your own personal choice map, which we're super excited about. So you'll get a blank choice map at the beginning. And by blank, meaning the bubbles are not filled in. You will get to indicate what questions you're thinking with and get to notice what is the landscape of your mindset as it relates to this challenge. And then you get to work through a series of steps of applying question thinking to your situation. And then at the end, check back in and notice how your questions have shifted, what new questions that you're thinking with. So just like the nomads, the future founders of Las Vegas, thousands of years ago, started asking the question, how can water come to us? That now you may be asking some different questions, and maybe it'll be a giant paradigm shift that changes the course of human history, or maybe yours will be more of a paradigm shift like mine that changed the course of my relationship. Because now when I see the toilet paper the wrong way, I think the person loved me that he actually replaces the toilet paper. Because especially for the ladies out there, have you gotten to the bathroom to find no toilet paper on the roll? Right? That would not be my preference. So, a simple thing like that has actually helped me deepen my relationship with the person that I love most. So that's really the essence of what's unique about the workbook.
Can we show the slide here about what's
Yeah.
unique?
Just to remind people. So you go on your own personal journey. You have your mindset challenge, and then you get to apply the tools of question thinking throughout the workbook. So instead of it being a set of concepts, it's really truly a set of personal experiences. And you can go back and work through it multiple times and try on different things. The one thing I will offer as a bit of coaching is we encourage you to pick a situation for your journey that's you with another human being and who's not you. And you with you, right? Some of us have really strong self-judge or conversations that would benefit from this as well. But the value of focusing on a relationship with another person who's not the man or woman or individual in the mirror is that person will give you feedback. Whether you want it or not, they will give you feedback. They'll notice how you're interacting with them differently, how you're thinking with different questions changes the dynamics between you. And some of you might be asking, how can you use it? So I'm going to invite Becky to flip the slide. You can use it you with you. So I've got a challenge, personal or professional, something I'd really like to master my mindset around, and I can work through the workbook on my own. You can use it in partnership, and partnership can look a number of different ways. If you're a coach, you can actually give it to someone that you're coaching and invite them to pick a situation that they've been working on in coaching, and they can step through it and you can coach them along the way. Marilee, she was talking about the importance of this question thinking methodology to advancing inquiry-based coaching. And this is a great opportunity. Or you can use it with a learning partner. So you can grab an accountability buddy. And I saw some people talking in the chat earlier about having an accountability team and going through it with a friend. And you can even choose not to share what your mindset challenge is, just what's opening up for you as you start to examine and notice the questions you're thinking with. And what question am I thinking with is a great question to think with. And then my favorite is you can do it in a group. So it can be a book club kind of group. If you're really daring, you can do it with your family. If you're a super daring manager, maybe you do it with your team. And for the truly brave hearts out there, you and your team pick a shared challenge that you're experiencing and make that the common challenge. And I guarantee you, even if all of you are working on the same business problem, you will have different mindset challenges related to it because different people within the dynamic will trigger you and you'll each bring different aspects to it. I had the privilege of facilitating a team and they had a frustration over another site. And by working through the practicum, which we've done for years in workshops, it became the foundation of our thinking about the design of the workshop, the workbook, and the challenge that you go through there. They started to go, oh my goodness, this poor other site had all these limitations in literally the physical space they were in that was impairing their ability to deliver. And it was through looking at that challenge together that they suddenly went from those folks over there to this deep sense of compassion for their colleagues who were in an unwinnable situation. And that was a transformation that occurred just through using a couple of the tools that you get to do in the workbook.
That's great. I'm going to add two things because so many of you are interested in questions. So Andrea brought up a wonderful question to be asking yourself about yourself questions, which is, what question am I thinking with? Then you get to evaluate it and see if it works or if you want to ask another one. Now, most of you are also interested in questions that you ask other people. And there are tons of books about that, tons of coaching books about that. But I'm going to give you one tip for designing your questions that you're going to be asking of others. And that's simply to ask yourself, what do I want my question to accomplish? If you ask yourself that question seriously, it has you think about the other person's point of view. It has you think about a way that you both can win in this situation, and it makes you more thoughtful. So it's a design principle. What do I want my question to accomplish? And if that's what you take from today and start using, either that question or what questions am I thinking with, that already will become a natural and new way of upping the game for yourself, either personally or professionally.
Those are really very powerful questions, Marilee. And I'm curious, do you actually do this in a formal way to write down the questions that you want. So you ask yourself the question, what do I want my questions to accomplish? And
Mhm.
then do you actually write down the questions that you want to ask to get to the
Yes.
outcome that you're looking for before you go into the conversation?
Yes, and in fact, there's a section of the workbook where people are guided through a protocol to do exactly that. It's called Q Prep, and it's a wonderful, wonderful tool for preparing for a meeting, for a conversation with somebody, even for beginning a project. So yes, and I do
What
that all the time. In fact, here's my Q Prep. I keep it by my desk all the time, and I hardly make a call without doing some prep first.
That's really helpful. So we have a question from Bob, and we are going to switch now. And so if you have any questions for Marilee or for Andrea, please feel free to put those in the chat, and we're going to surface them and go through them over the next few minutes. Bob wants to know how much you address the tone and nonverbal communication of the question and the conversations.
I love that question. Yeah, oftentimes when people teach about questioning, they talk about delivery, which of course is a useful thing to talk about. When we talk about mindset, it's deeper. So when we ask a question from judger, it's going to have a judger impact, and our tone, it may have some eye rolling associated with it. But if we ask a similar question from learner, it's going to be a different experience. So Bob, what you tapped into was something I didn't mention earlier, which is this is also a method. This is about being. And as you all know, in terms of leadership, leadership is about being first, then doing. So managing your mindset as you interact with somebody or as you think about interacting with somebody is going to have a profound impact on the delivery and on the other person and on the results of that interaction.
That's really helpful.
Go further, but I'm gonna not.
Yeah, I wonder if we could try it. I was thinking about the question, like, what were you thinking when? And how you could use that question as a learner or a judger. Do you think you two could try it with the different tones or mindsets?
I actually have something to say about that. So you're all probably familiar with the question, and I'm going to exaggerate this, and I'm not going to look at the screen so nobody gets freaked out. But if I look at this person over there and go, what were you thinking? It's going to have a certain impact, right? If now I'm going to just do a mindset shift here, switch. And if I ask the question like, oh, what were you thinking? Is that the same question? You don't need to answer. The words were the same. The question was entirely different. The impact will be entirely different, and the results will be entirely different. Does that answer your question, Becky?
It does. Thank you. Thank you for playing along. I thought that would be fun. So we do have a ton of questions that are coming in. I want to surface this one from Gilbert, who's asking, how can you apply question thinking in a research environment, or is it only limited to personal and relationship?
Oh, that's a great question. I spent 10 years teaching leadership at American University, and many of our students, almost all of them, were from the federal government, many of them from NIH and from the National Science Foundation. We had a lot of fun working with this material. First of all, as you know, every research project starts with the question. And if the question isn't a really great question, you can kiss the research goodbye. But that's only the research part. There's also the interpersonal part, the leadership part, the team part. And if you have a team that is, I'm going to show you my handy dandy choice map here. Because the choice map is, it's drawn for an individual, but there's also, and I'll ask you, anybody here ever been on a judger team? Just answer for yourself. Have you been on a learner team? You can answer for yourself. Are they different and how? You can answer for yourself. But in every one of those, I can remember so many conversations, particularly with NIH, where they were dealing with teams, not just with the scientific method of question asking, which actually is integrated into this. And they made huge shifts in their leadership and in the engagement and coordination of the team by using this material.
And Marilee, if I can jump in on a really very practical basis, one of the things that I observe as a people leader in organization and as a coach is that oftentimes the disconnects that we're having are because we're actually thinking about the same topic with different questions. So if you're in a research context, you might be designing a research experiment and two people are looking at how are we going to prove X or disprove Y, but they're thinking with different questions about the process or the mechanism or what's prioritized or what's important. And how many times have you been in a conversation personally with, name the person in your life, and you're thinking, what the heck are they thinking, right? And probably from judger, because they're thinking, you are both talking about, the mouse on my computer, but you're wondering how the wireless works and who invented the technology, and they're wondering why it's gray. Now, you could be having this conversation where it feels like you're not connecting with one another. So this idea of what questions are we thinking with, and Marilee, I love this term that she uses, and I've stolen it and now made it part of my lexicon, which is I'm putting my questions on loudspeaker. And so how much conflict could we minimize or avoid altogether if instead of keeping our internal questions to ourselves, we started to turn them on loudspeaker? So I frequently say to people that I'm working with on projects, here are the questions I'm thinking with about this client challenge. What questions are you thinking with? And then we're able to get them all on the table and go, oh, you know what? These questions are going to lead us somewhere really productive. Maybe those questions are not in the right sequence, or they're useful, but they're not as eminently valuable in this moment. So, especially in a research setting, how can we prioritize where our focus should be and which questions we should be thinking with?
And add a very quick thing to that, it's very relevant. When we're in judger, and there's all kinds of research about this I won't go into, but literally our cognitive abilities are like tunnel vision. So we can't see what's outside. When we're in learner, we're able to see more peripherally, take in more options. And for the best problem solving and solution seeking, we need the widest thinking. So judger thinking can, without our being intended about it, have us miss really, really critical things. And I'll quote something from myself, which is every question missed is a potential crisis waiting to happen. And I like to scare people with that, particularly in IT situations or intelligence agencies where I've worked, because they see that if you miss a question, it could have very poor results. So I'll stop there. We could do this for hours, but let's take another question.
Sure. Well, so I want to ask, is there ever an opportunity to gently, if the team has shared vocabulary, so assume in an organization you have the vocabulary of judger and learner, what would be the way that you could call someone out or draw attention to the fact that they've shifted into judger in a way that helps the team move forward more productively?
Do that all the time. And so first of all, people have the language, they have the concepts, and I often have them talk about, well, the time is going to come when we're going to run into something jagged and somebody or many people are going to go judger. Let's talk about how we're going to handle that before it happens so that we have something to fall back on. Or if somebody looks like they're in judger, and we never know for sure, we could be asking them, if I think you're in judger, how can I say that to you in a way that will invite you into learner rather than make you go further into judger? So it becomes part of the conversation. And go ahead.
Oh, I was just going to offer, I have good news, which is You don't even have to be with a group of people who have this vocabulary
Right,
to
right.
use question thinking to shift the group. Now, here's what not to do. All y'all are being judger or some version of that, right? Or why is everyone so judger? Fake learner. But you can ask a switching question. So, I've countless times found myself in situations with people who don't yet have the choice map and don't yet have the paradigm of question thinking. And when I hear what sounds to be like judger, I can draw on a switching question like, how else might we think about this? What might we be missing here? That's a favorite one of mine, when people start to get stuck and looking at something in a particular way, to invite us to look around and widen the aperture, if you will. And another one is, if we felt exactly the opposite of this, right? Or we thought the opposite, what might we be saying? So just invitations to explicitly change the paradigm and change the framing are great switching questions and can shift a group, even if they're not aware of the language of judger and learner.
Here's some other important points here, which is we tend to think learner good, judger bad. But that's not a useful way to think. Sometimes, and maybe often, when somebody is in judger, there's a good reason for it. There's maybe a value that's being disrespected, or a piece of information they have that other people don't. So if we can get curious and engage with them, then we could discover and bring that voice into the table. And I think it's really important to remember that we cannot, quote, make somebody come to learner. That would be manipulative. It doesn't work. And always the first thing to do is get myself back into learner. I've been doing this for many, many, many years. I'm very practiced at it. I know that when something happens that looks judger out there or that triggers me, my first job is to get myself back into learner, interact with someone from that place, and perhaps even invite them to join me there.
Wonderful.
Go ahead. I just saw something that, especially for the individuals who are new to Marilee's work and to question thinking, I think it was Irene who asked, how do I help people and support people who aren't aware yet that they're thinking with questions? And the one that is most frequently used in our workshops, and I use with people all the time when I'm quickly introducing question thinking in a new group dynamic, is, how did you end up dressed in what you're wearing today? People can quickly relate to, you probably, whether you realized it or not, because it may have happened so quickly and unconsciously, ask yourself questions like, what will the weather be? How will this look on Zoom, right? Will I be going out? What's clean? Will I be comfortable? Will I be warm enough? Whatever it is. Most of us can relate really quickly to those questions, especially if you're in a Zoom environment. Probably everybody's wearing clothes. I find that professionally, that's a pretty safe bet. And even the people who are off camera. And so that's a quick way to go, oh yeah, I did think with some of those questions. And then I'm able to quickly move from there and say, that's what I'm talking about when I say we think with questions. So I'm curious right now, as you're looking at this problem, as you're looking at this project, what questions now that you can hear the whisper are you thinking with? And that's, for me, a really great way to draw, whether it's clients or coworkers, to draw out what's part of their internal experience. And it makes me a more effective coach, a more effective manager, and just, a more effective person.
That's great.
So we only have time for one more question, and there are several questions that have come in that we haven't had the chance to get to. I know, Marilee, you and your team are going to look for other ways to answer those questions in your content over the upcoming weeks and months. So we appreciate all the questions. It helps us learn what you need from us. But I want to ask this question that came in from Steve. He said, how can readers share with you their stories of the impact of this book and these ideas? So maybe there's some people on the call, they've been influenced by this book in big ways. They have stories that they want to share with you. What's the best way for them to share those stories with you?
Oh, well, we would love to hear people's stories. You certainly can email us at some point in the future, we're going to be having a place on our website where we're collecting switching stories. And those are usually the most exciting because it's a judger. Somebody starts out in judger and they switch and they end up in learner and something very different happens. So we invite your switching stories, your questions. You could call them learner stories. And what's really great about that is when you hear somebody else's story, it gives you ideas for things that you can do yourself.
And I noticed Lori in the chat said something that was on my mind, you know, there's a review spot. So if you're picking up this book and you've worked with it before and you've got a great story to share, please feel free to share it there, you know, and reply to the Inquiry Institute post on LinkedIn with your stories. We'd love to see them there. And then that's the benefit of a place where other people will get to celebrate with you the value of switching to learner and learning to live primarily on the learner path.
Wonderful. So as we're wrapping up today's session, we do want to make you aware of some different ways that you can continue to learn from the Inquiry Institute team. We earlier took a look together at the choice map, and several of you throughout the event have been asking, how do I get the choice map? So Wendy is going to put in the chat the link where you can, as Marilee said earlier, take a brief quiz. And then once you've taken the quiz, you'll get this choice map for free. So we encourage you definitely to take advantage of that. And then let's talk about a few ways that you can help us to spread this important message in the world. If you're passionate about the way that question thinking can really change situations, change relationships, change organizations, we hope today that you'll take one of these 5 actions. The first one is that if you have not already ordered the new edition of the book and the workbook, you could order today on Amazon or your favorite retailer. And what that does is it helps the book to start to rank on Amazon. It helps Amazon to show it to more people, and we can reach more people who might need this content. The second thing is, if you've already read and enjoyed the book or the workbook, we really are looking for reviews on both. If you could take a few minutes to share an honest Amazon review, we would appreciate that. We would love it if you would choose to share the book and the workbook on social media, whichever platform you're using, with your colleagues and friends. And in fact, we're going to send a follow-up to this email where you'll have a link to view this webinar on YouTube. And if you think your colleagues, friends, family would like to watch the webinar, we would encourage you to share this link with them as well. You can also buy the book in bulk. And if you want to buy 20, 50, 100, 200, 300 copies of the book or workbook, you can contact the Inquiry Institute to find out more about bulk pricing of this book. And we're also going to put in the chat a way that you can stay in touch with Marilee and Andrea and the Inquiry Institute. So we hope that you'll take advantage of all 5 of these ways that you can help, but certainly one of them today. And I want to again thank our sponsor, Barrett Kohler Publishers, who's responsible for bringing us today's webinar event. And at this point, I want to turn things back over to Marilee. I believe you have a powerful story to leave us with today.
I do have a story to leave us with. I love stories. This is comes from a workshop that we did years ago. This is pre-pandemic when we were actually meeting in person over time. And this was a 2-day workshop. And we had covered a lot of this material on the first day of the workshop that you've heard bits of here. And there was a gentleman named Walt in the workshop. He arrived the second morning, with this big grin on his face. And he said in the early sharing, I have a story to tell you. And this was his story. He had come home from the workshop the night before. Oh, and he had taken the workshop for leadership development and for professional development. That's what he was there for, because he wanted to be better with his team. And he came home to discover that there was a huge flood in his kitchen. His wife was standing there crying. All the water was falling through the floor into the basement below, where his office was, all of his records, all the things that he really cared about. And his wife said, she was so upset, she said, this was your whole world, and I just ruined it. And he took a step back. He paused, very important, he paused. He asked himself a switching question, which was probably, what do I really want with my wife? what he actually said to her was, "No, sweetheart, you're my whole world." That's a result of question thinking and of switching questions and paying attention to our interactions and relationships with others. And thank you so much for joining us today. It's really been fun and a pleasure.